Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Drag Detective, where today we are going to solve the mystery of what would have happened if All Stars 5 and 6 kept with the lip sync for your legacy top 2 format. How different would the seasons have been? Obviously, there's a lot of talk about queens being robbed when they did change this format, such as like Jujubee and Alexis Mateo and Trinity K Bonet. So we will see if the seasons followed the same format as All Stars 2 and 3 and 4. Would this have changed the trajectory of the seasons? Now, for one of the seasons, it's a yes. The other one, it's a sort of. But we will break it all down. I'm actually going to start with All Stars 6 because this one is a little less interesting, and then we can move on to All Stars 5, and that is absolute chaos. So, All Stars 6, we have the very first episode is the variety show, of course, and first, we have to figure out who will be the top 2. Now, this is not based off of my track records or what I think would be fair. This is fully based off the judges' critiques each week. So if they're in the top, we'll look at who's on the top, and if they were on the bottom, they're going to be in the bottom, even if it was rigged. Here were the top 3 for the talent show, which is, I don't see Jan, I don't see Scarlet Envy, so obviously rigged. But based on the judges' critiques, I think the top 2 is very clearly going to be Yara Sofia and Raja O'Hara. So they will then lip sync to Uptown Funk. And the bottom 2 for that episode were Serena Chacha and Trinity K Bonet. So as we know, Yara did vote against Trinity, whereas Raja voted with the group and they voted for Serena Chacha. So based off who wins this lip sync will determine who goes home first. So Raja versus Yara, who is going to win? It's going to be Raja O'Hara. This is totally up her alley. I mean, Uptown Funk is very reminiscent of Living in America, that kind of like funky 70s vibe, and we know Raja completely demolished that lip sync, so I don't think she would have a problem beating Yara here, who did fine, but just wasn't giving as much as I think was necessary for this kind of like up-tempo, I almost said uptown, this up-tempo uptown song. Raja is going to win, and Serena Chacha is going to sashay away. And we move on to episode 2, which was the Blue Ball. Our top 3 were Raja again. This time she's there with Kylie Sonique Love and Eureka. What's going to happen here? This one is tough because Raja wins the challenge. She's going to take one of those 2 spots. But between Eureka and Kylie, the critiques were very, very even. I watched the critiques back. They liked Eureka's first look, I think, a lot more than their second 2 looks, whereas I think they really enjoyed Kylie's first 2 looks, and then her third look, they were like, it's fine, it's good. But I think they are going to give it to Kylie here, only because she had a really good theme throughout all of her looks, and they seem to just be like the taddest bit more excited about her presentation rather than Eureka's. So we have Kylie versus Raja to Miss You Much by Janet Jackson, Jiggly and Yara Sofia in the bottom. We know they both voted out Jiggly along with the rest of the cast, so it really doesn't matter who wins, but I genuinely think this is still going to be a double shantay. Miss You Much is one of the best Janet Jackson songs. We saw Brooke and Raja completely demolished with all the stunts and all the gags, and I think that Kylie would do the exact same thing that Brooke did with like launching herself, doing her cartwheels and her backflips and her backbends. Like, it would be very much giving Sorry Not Sorry vibes, I think, and it would still be a double shantay. They both sent home Jiggly Caliente, and we move on to episode 3, which was the Side Hustles Challenge, where we have a top 4, which is the Team Fix It Bitch, which I still am not over to this day. And based on, we didn't actually get to see critiques for anyone because they just gave Trinity the win and then they all got off the stage. So I'm not sure exactly who they would have given the win to, but just based off who they were laughing at the most while the commercial was airing, I think the top 2 would be Yara again and Trinity. And then we have the entire group. I don't even remember what their thing was, but it was Ginger, Akira, Jan, and Silky in the bottom 4. So they lip sync to Physical. Unfortunately, Laganja's not here. But I think without Laganja here, Trinity could definitely win. I mean, we saw Yada lip sync 2 times this season, and both of them were fine, but they just left a little bit to be desired. Whereas Trinity ate up the whole stage. She did a fantastic job, and if she was up against almost anyone but Laganja, I think she would have won. So she's going to win, and they both picked Silky to go home, so Silky is going to go home here, just like she did on the actual season. So let's move on to my favorite episode of the season, and possibly my favorite episode of Drag Race ever, the halftime shows. Now, our top 3 were Eureka, I don't know why, Jan, and Trinity. Obviously, our top 2 is going to be Jan and Trinity, where they will lip sync to Womanizer, where they will give Jan a horrible edit in that lip sync. But what's interesting here is they both voted for someone different. So the thing that complicates things here is you could say, well, in this scenario, Yada already has 2 wins, Akira has none, and she's already been in the bottom. So wouldn't Trinity still vote for Akira? I think Trinity was very much a strategic player on this season. She knows that Yada voted against her week 1, and all it took was for Yada to win that lip sync, and Trinity would have went home. So I think she would 1000% vote for Yada here, just like she did in episode 2, despite Yada having 2 top 2 placements at this point. It's really going to come down to who wins the lip sync to determine who will go home, and I mean, I love you, Jan, but Trinity's going to win here, and she's going to send home Yada, which I think would be kind of a gaggy moment. But we can move on to the next episode, one of the most controversial episodes, I want to say, when it came to placements and things, the Pink Table Talks episode. So we have our top 4, which was Team Eureka plus Ginger, who they gave the win for some reason. And of these, I think it's going to clearly be Eureka and Ginger as the top 2. They were the best 2 moderators and really led their teams as best they could. Ginger maybe not so much, but especially Eureka. So in this scenario, we have bottom 3 of Jan, Kylie, and Scarlett. And we see Ginger and Eureka voted differently, with Eureka voting for Jan and Ginger voting for Scarlett. So the lip sync is Phone by Lizzo, and I genuinely think this would be very, very hard to judge because Eureka is super good at camping up a lip sync and making it super funny. And Ginger, obviously, we saw this was her best lip sync performance of her entire Drag Race career. So what would happen here? I think that Ginger would win and Scarlett would go home, because if you are watching the season, Scarlett had no storyline. They never put her in the top, despite her having some really solid performances in her short time there. And then you look at Jan, who was kind of self-destructing at this point and had a really good story arc going. And I think at this point, Scarlett just wasn't on the producer's radar. That's why they threw her in the bottom in the first place. And they're not going to give Eureka the win and lose this storyline with Jan so soon. Ginger would win, and Scarlett would unfortunately still go home. And then we can move on to the Rumerican Horror Story episode, where we have a top 3 of Ginger, Jan, and Kylie. So this one is also really hard. Obviously, Kylie is going to be top 2. She won the challenge. But between Ginger and Jan, I watched the critiques a couple times for this, for both of them, and they both got really, really good critiques. The one thing that made me make a decision here was the music that they played in the background. Because as we know, music cues can really make us feel a way that they want us to feel. If someone's being annoying, they just have to add that like crazy clown music in the background and suddenly we're like, oh, this queen's psychotic, get rid of her. So in this case, Ginger got like some regular positive critique music, but Jan got some, I don't want to say like redemption music, but it really sounded like really positive, really upbeat, a little bit more than we would normally get in a critique. And I think they definitely wanted to highlight, just like once more, that Jan is a solid competitor. She's a solid drag queen, and she did a good job in this episode. And as we know, a lot of the season was just kind of shitting on Jan in the edit. So this was her one moment to kind of like get that one last solid critique before she goes home the next episode. So that's the one thing I had to go off of. I think they would give it to Jan. She also had a much better runway than Ginger did. And we saw Ginger was just in the top the week prior. So it could go either way, but I'm going to give it to Jan here. And as you'll see later, it really doesn't affect anything, whichever one gets it. But I think for storyline purposes, Jan, if in this moment, would have had a kind of redemption moment before she bows out the next episode. Spoiler alert. So she's going to lip sync against Kylie Sonique Love to Dirty by Christina Aguilera. We have a bottom two of Akira C. Davenport and Raja O'Hara. And, I mean, come on. Kylie's going to win. Doesn't matter. And Akira is still going to go home. So the next episode we have is Show Up Queen. I would say most of the queens were actually in the top this week, but the three with the best critiques were Kylie, Raja, and Trinity. They also had the best runways of that week. Of the three, I do think it would be Raja and Trinity in the top two. And as we saw, they both picked Jan to go home at this very controversial and dramatic moment where in the actual episode, we have a tie between Jan and Pandora, and then Trinity has to break the tie. Here, it doesn't matter. They both pick Jan. They lip sync to Dance Again by J-Lo. We know Trinity had kind of a fashion malfunction when her wig flew off. So I think Raja would get the win here. And Jan goes home. As we've seen, no eliminations are different yet, but the win distribution is a little bit different. Let's keep going and we'll review like wins and stuff before we go to the top four. So the next episode is Snatch Game of Love. And I think the top three were Ginger, Kylie, and Raja. Eureka could have been there too. Raja and Eureka got pretty similar critiques with, some positive and some negative in there. But I think it's very clear that the top two were Ginger and Kylie. Obviously, in Snatch Game of Love, there's usually one winner from each team. But I think they would have changed that here because it was just so clearly between Kylie and Ginger for the win. It would not have made sense to give the win to someone on the other team. So we have Kylie and we have Ginger lip syncing to Sugar Walls. And we have Trinity and Pandora in the bottom two. Now, Ginger, I think, did a really good job in this lip sync, but I honestly think Kylie could also do a really good job here. I think it's that, 80s pop fun song that Kylie could really just, amp up. I think Ginger's kind of comedy camp style just didn't fit with the song perfectly. So I'm going to give the win here to Kylie. They both voted out Pandora. And we move on to episode 9, which was the Drag Tots episode. And at this point, we're also going to shift into, if you're not in the top, you're in the bottom. So who is going to be in the top with Raja, who actually won this episode? I would say the other two who had really good critiques were Trinity and Ginger. But I think Trinity would definitely take that second top two spot. So we have a bottom three of Eureka, Ginger, and Kylie, and we have Trinity and Raja lip syncing to Boom Clap. It doesn't matter who wins, they both vote out Eureka, but I do think Trinity would win this lip sync. This was not one of Raja's best, as the fandom definitely let her know. So we then move on to the lip sync SmackDown Lollapalooza, where Eureka comes right back. I mean, nothing changes because we have the exact same elimination order. And we can move on to our penultimate episode of the season, which is the Monologues episode. This was another one that was really hard to pick that top two spot because Eureka, Kylie, and Trinity all got really good critiques. But I'm going to give it to Kylie. I think her critiques were just a little bit better than Trinity's were. But it's honestly very, very close. So we're going to have Kylie and Eureka lip sync to Good Golly Miss Molly. And we have Ginger, Raja, and Trinity in the bottom. This was really, really difficult to determine who would go home, because if you look at the win distribution, we have Raja and Trinity both with 4 wins, while Ginger only has 2. But then if you look at who has the most bottoms, Trinity has 3, Ginger has 3, and Raja has 2. So it's a little bit difficult. I think that there's no way Eureka would have voted out Ginger. They're too good of friends, and we saw that throughout the season. I think Kylie would have went with Ginger simply because she had less wins and more bottoms. But I think that Eureka would pick Raja here, because if you look at the mini challenge from this episode, or maybe this mini challenge was the Drag Tots one. I'm not sure which episode it was in, but basically they're doing like superlatives, and one of them is who's the next to go home, and Eureka picks Raja, which people were a little bit surprised by, but to me, that makes me think that Eureka thought Raja was doing the least impressive out of everyone there, because why else would you pick her? So that is honestly the only thing I have to go off of. I don't think she would pick Trinity, because Trinity has 4 wins, and we know they were really, really good friends, and it was really hard for her to pick Trinity in this episode. And unfortunately, I think Eureka wins the lip sync, and Raja then goes home. So looking at the stats of this top 4, Kylie is actually in the lead with the best track record, followed by Trinity, and then Eureka, and then Ginger. So obviously Kylie does a really good job in this last episode. Trinity, I think, could also do a really good job. I mean, she won the girl group challenge on the season, so I think she could deliver a really solid verse. So I think, honestly, the crown is between those two. And it all comes down to the Stupid Love lip sync, where I do think Kylie, with her cartwheel save, kind of just took the season for herself. You know what I mean? It's one of those moments where it's like, you could justify Raja winning, you could justify Kylie winning, you could justify Ginger winning, but that moment is what broke the tie. And I think the same thing would happen here with Trinity. They both have 4 wins, and Trinity actually has more bottoms than Kylie did. So, yeah, I think in this case, Kylie still wins the season, but we do see Trinity actually make top 4 and come very, very close to winning the crown. So, not much changes, but we do see Trinity get to the final 4, which I think a lot of people really, really would have loved to see. So, there's that. Now we can look at All Stars 5, which is chaos. I was like running this and I was like, is this really what would happen? And I, checked my work and I was like, you know what? This makes the absolute most sense. I'm pretty sure this is how it would go down. So let's buckle up and go through this wild ride that is All Stars 5 with the top 2 format. So now for All Stars 5, let's start off with the very first episode, the assassination of Derek Barry. Just kidding. I mean, not really. So for the talent show, the 3 queens that we have in the high position are Alexis Mateo, Ms. Cracker, and India Farah. Based on the judges' critiques, I think that our top 2 would then be Alexis and India, both of our Vegas queens. And that makes it a little bit interesting because obviously Derek is in the bottom with Mayhem Miller. And Alexis has a great relationship with Derek, and India has a horrible relationship with Derek. So who knows what's going to happen? Obviously, they end up both voting for Derek in the end. But they're going to lip sync to Live in La Vida Loca. And India did okay during this lip sync, but I do think Alexis could do better here and take home the win. And then we see Derek Barry sashay away, unfortunately. And with it, any hope of this season being a top-tier season is gone. And we move on to one of my favorite RuPaul's Drag Race songs of all time, I'm in Love. Our top 3 is Blair, Juju, and Shea Coulee. And I think the top 2 would very easily be Blair and Shea. They both gave such good performances in this episode. Obviously, everybody votes for Angina. The bottom 3, Angina, India, and Mariah. They're going to lip sync to Neutron Dance. Shea is going to win. Angina is going to go home. Now, the next episode, this is where things get very interesting. This is our hotel design challenge, the one that is fully rigged when it came down to the placements. And I wasn't sure exactly what would happen here because we have Blair and Mayhem, who are told by Ru that they were the best team. But then the winner is from another team, and that's Jujubee. I went back and forth whether or not Jujubee would be in this top 2, but I came to the conclusion that with only one challenge winner an episode, Jujubee, I'm sure, was someone they wanted to see go far, and this is their chance for her to get a win. But I think because of the top 2 format, they can bank on the fact that Jujubee's probably going to do at least top 2 for another week. And so our top 2 is going to be Blair and Mayhem. This just makes more sense since RuPaul literally told them they had the best room, which I think is bullshit, but that's what they said.
That's what she said. And you know what? What was that? Okay, James.
So our bottom 3 is India and Mariah and Shea. We have them lip syncing to Juice, and I mean, come on, Mayhem is going to win this. That's not even my bias, that is just the truth. And she's going to send home our winner, Shea Coulee, in episode 3. So obviously this is going to shake up literally the entire season and change the winner, change who's going to be in the finals. So let's continue on with one of my least favorite episodes of all time, SheMZ. Controversial opinion. I think that whoever was given that skit that India and Mayhem were in would be in the bottom. That one just made absolutely no sense. I don't know how you make that coherent enough to be a solid skit. And I think that they threw the 2 queens in there that they didn't care about, which were Mayhem and India at this point. But since Mariah is still around, and obviously they care even less about Mariah than they do about Mayhem, I actually think they're going to put Mariah and India together in this skit. And obviously, RuPaul just tells them, here are your teams, here's your skit. So they get to kind of pick and choose who they give the better skits to, who they give the worst skits to. And they are going to basically just sink the ships of India and Mariah here. And then I think Mayhem could do a pretty solid job in the skit with Alexis. We saw her do a solid job in the skit with India. Like, I don't know what to tell you. But basically, I think Cracker and Juju are the very clear, obvious top 2. Alexis struggled in this challenge. Blair struggled in this challenge. I think Mayhem could do probably the 3rd best, but it still would not be enough to top those 2, despite how easy it is to top those 2. We're going to have a top 2 of Cracker and Jujubee. They're going to lip sync to Where Have You Been by Rihanna. And we have a bottom 2 of Mariah and India. Now, Jujubee is an iconic lip syncer, but I don't think this was going to be her song. Cracker was doing the stunts, she was doing her, crunchy death drops, whatever. But she seemed to be entertaining the judges, and I think that this song is just more up her alley. So Cracker is going to win here, and Mariah is going to go home. So in our next challenge, we have the Snatch Game. We are going to have, if you're not in the top, you're in the bottom. Here, with people who we have left, I think Alexis, Jujubee, and Mayhem would probably do the best. I mean, we see that Blair and Cracker and India all did pretty bad. I think Mayhem could do better than those 3, but I don't think there's any chance of her beating Alexis or Jujubee. Those were 2 masterclass performances in the Snatch Game. So we have those as our top 2. They're gonna lip sync to Open Your Heart by Madonna. And this is kind of the song that Jujubee is perfect at. I mean, it's just like a feel-good, happy, jovial song. So I think that Juju would win here, but it would probably be pretty close. And she gets to send home anyone that she wants. But I do think, at this point, she would send home India, who had been in the bottom kind of a lot at this point. So we now move on to the Backyard Ball, where I think Cracker obviously won. Jujubee did a really good job with her Amber. And we saw Mayhem win a sewing challenge on her season. So I think that Mayhem could do a solid job here as well. But I think the top two would be Cracker and Jujubee again. And they are going to lip sync to the original song from this episode, which we just found out. It's Why'd You Come In Here Looking Like That by Dolly Parton. Since we don't have Roxy Andrews coming in and saying, I'm not lip syncing to that song, this probably would have stayed the lip sync song. So I think Jujubee would win this. Again, it's more of like an up-tempo, happy, jovial song. That is right up Juju's alley. So Juju is going to win again. And she, I think at this point, would send home Mayhem. I think it's close between Mayhem and Blair, but Mayhem would have had more bottoms and less wins at this point than Blair has. So I think she would be gone. And for anyone saying that I gave Mayhem some preferential treatment here, I truly don't want to hear it. She's literally not even one of my like all-time favorites, but I love the meme. I'm here for the shtick at this point. So yeah, Mayhem's Drag Race. Welcome to my channel. And now we have our top four. It's Cracker, Jujubee, Alexis, and Blair. They're going to do the stand-up challenge. And I think our top two would be Cracker and Alexis. I think Alexis would do pretty solid. She did an okay job in her stand-up challenge on season 3. And her only real competition here is Jujubee, who kind of had some stumbles throughout. I think in this case, Alexis might be able to pass Jujubee here and take that top 2 spot. So they're going to lip sync to Fancy by Reba McEntire. Not 2 country songs in a row, but whatever. I think that Alexis could take this one. This is like an old drag standard. And while it's not necessarily up either of their alleys, I think that like Cracker doing a cartwheel and stuff like wasn't great. I think Alexis is really good at emoting and kind of getting the essence of the song. And I think that she could definitely win here. So yeah, Alexis now solidified her spot in the finale, and she would send home Blair. And now we have our top 3. So looking at the scoreboard, Cracker has 3 wins, Jujubee has 3 wins, and Alexis has 3 wins. So they're all tied there. When it comes to bottoms, Cracker has 1 bottom, Jujubee has 1 bottom, and Alexis has 1 bottom. This is a very tight race, unlike the actual season where, Cracker had 3 wins, Shay had 2, and Jujubee had 1. They all have the same amount of wins and bottoms. It could go to anyone, but I do think based off of, who production really, really wanted to see get a crown at this point, I don't think Cracker was going to win just based off of her edits and based off of just how she played the game. So it's between Jujubee and Alexis, but I think Jujubee would win in this case. Alexis, I just don't think has the cachet that Jujubee has. People were clamoring for Jujubee to win this season when we got to that finale in the actual season. And while I think Alexis would also have a ton of support, I think that they would probably go in the direction of Jujubee over Alexis. Since, she's just one of those, like, when you think of Drag Race, Jujubee is one of the first queens you think of. So it makes sense that they would be like, you know what, let's give her crown. She deserved it. She earned it. And the fans really like her. So it could be Alexis, but I'm gonna say it's probably gonna be Jujubee in this scenario, which is completely made up and not real, and nothing that I say matters, and there's no reason to get mad in the comments about it. Let me just preface that. But let me know what you think. I had a lot of fun putting this together. I was going to do 2 separate videos, but then I was like, the All-Star 6 one's not that interesting. Let's just lump them together and make one big video. And the next video coming out will be about All-Stars 5 and what if it wasn't rigged, how that would go. And as you know, I think that season is very rigged, so it might be a very different season based off what we got. So I can't wait to do that. Thank you guys so much for watching. Here are the links to all of my social medias. Make sure you check out my Patreon. I'm about to drop a redo of What If Season 12 Was Unrigged. I'm going to start to do some of my older videos again for my patrons, ones that maybe I don't agree with my opinions anymore. And yes, I will say Gigi Good deserved to win Snatch Game, but no, I won't say Gigi Good deserved to win the Ball. So there's just a little spoiler. If you want to check out the whole video as well as many other patron-only videos, you can check out my Patreon. Also, thank you so much to my beautiful patrons here, my reporters and my investigators. I'm very, very thankful for you as always, and thanks for keeping me going. It has been such a long, long day solving the mystery of, was Alexis Mateo robbed? And the answer is, duh, obviously. I mean, some things are just true, you know what I mean? Like, the sky is blue, the grass is green, Alexis Mateo was robbed in All Stars 5. So, I'm glad we're all on the same page here, and I will catch you guys in the next one.